Welcome to the Northwest Tank Line Super Bowl show, coming to you from Radio Row, Phoenix Convention Center, our 22nd year at the big game. And looking forward to talking to this next gentleman, former NFL quarterback Erik Kramer. Erik, welcome.
Thank you, fellas. I appreciate being here.
Well, you know what? First off, every time we have a guest come by, the handlers always give a bio and, talk about what, some of the topics that we're in. We'll get into some of these topics. I'm looking at your bio here. Detroit Lions, 91-93. Chicago Bears, 94-98. Chargers, 99. Calgary Stampeders, 1988. Larry Kaharich, old school football. Freddie Bolitnikoff, receivers coach. Wally Buono, coaching the linebackers.
We even had Joe Cap come in for a few weeks in training camp.
Oh, so. I feel bad for you now.
So, yeah, that was an interesting time. I played during the strike in '87 for the Falcons, and then they kept me that rest of that season. Ended up getting cut the following training camp, waited around, got no phone calls, and the only guy in college that ever worked me out was Wally Buono. Larry Kaharich.
Larry Kaharich.
And so, I remember coming in there. There was, I think, 6 games left in the season, and this is 88.
88.
And I think I got there like on a Wednesday, and ended up playing the second half on Saturday, and I think we beat Toronto or something. And so anyway, yeah, that was that was the most fun. Even though I didn't play very well all the time, it was the tightest knit team.
You talk to a lot of guys that have played both, and they say that, given the politics of the NFL and the paychecks involved, when you come to the CFL, you don't have that discrepancy between, your star quarterback and your backup receiver, so to speak, and it's more of a brotherhood. And I've heard that from so many guys that have played both leagues.
Well,
right?
That was, to me, like I said, the guys in the team, and actually in '89, Jeff Tedford was the quarterback coach.
Yeah.
And so, it's been it was and I still keep in touch with some of the guys that I played with back then.
Yeah, and it's amazing. We always talk about football being such a small world, that 1 degree of separation. And, Freddie Bolitnikoff, we see up in the interior of B.C. He's got a place up by Kamloops.
Okay.
And he comes to the Lions training camp in the summer sometimes. This was before COVID. We'll see this year if he makes his way up there. But, and then Wally, of course, and then, you get some of the other names. And unfortunately, I don't know if you know, I'm assuming you probably know, but Tim Petros passed away.
I did know that, unfortunately.
I played with his brother Mark at UBC, and know that family really well, with Nick Steakhouse, of course.
Right across the street.
Yeah, so it's always a small world, isn't it, when you talk to it's amazing because everybody thinks, this huge world, but man, oh man, it's always like 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
I love it. Nick's is great. I used to hang out there all the time, and Nick would jump out of the seat he's in when someone came in the front door, greet him, walk him to the table, hang out, talking to him a little bit, and he's got that little handlebar mustache.
Yeah, there you go.
It was awesome.
Hey, it's still there. Nick Steakhouse, it's still there. And I don't, a whole bunch of stuff we'll get into. We'll get into it later, though. But let's get into what you were here for at Radio Row at the Convention Center. For people that don't know your background, 11 seasons in the NFL, throwing for more than 15,000 yards, 92 touchdowns. The only Detroit Lions quarterback to win a playoff game in the last 66 years. I bet Andrew Wadden doesn't even know that, Mike Whittingham.
I'd say we're overdue, wouldn't you?
38-6 victory over the Cowboys in the 91-92 season. You'd lose the NFC Championship game to the Redskins that year. The Redskins, of course, would win the Super Bowl. But after football, you ran into some real hard times.
Yeah.
And I'll let you explain it because, I'm reading it in the bio here.
Well, I think like most people, when they get to an age of, let's say, 30, by now you've run into your share of hurdles to get over in life. And it's that process that ends up resulting in wherever you go and whatever you do, which even then is going to have some setbacks. And I think, so when what you're referring to is when my son Griffin, who at the time, he was 18 years old, and he passed away unexpectedly of an overdose. And he had been dealing with that in a what would you call it, an official capacity of treatment back in the middle of his sophomore year of high school. And so, I really feel bad for him because I was married at the time, and my wife and I we were in marriage counseling, but at the same time, Griffin was part of the subject matter. And so we had him tested by a neuropsychologist. And Dr. Beisman, after it takes place at that age for a kid, maybe 2 or 3 days. And what came back, the results of that were that his brain, it was affected in the frontal part, and it was the way he really couldn't process. He couldn't sit still, and he couldn't. So there was never going to come a day where school for him was going to be manageable, and friendships he would just unknowingly sabotage, and then wonder heartbrokenly why he's at home by himself. And so, I look at it like now with some perspective that, okay, he passed away at 18, but I remember I've been in Al-Anon that whole time, before, during, and even after, and even now. And the stories are always the same. And it doesn't matter how old you are, because there were parents that were in their 70s that were talking about their kids in their 50s who had kids themselves, and no one knew where their own kid was. And so the story is always the same. Eventually you're gonna lose everything. You're gonna lose your job, you're gonna lose your family, and at least in Griffin's situation, as tragic as it was, and still is, at least he didn't have that much. He didn't have a lot of people counting on him to have him then be gone.
Clearly losing a child is something I can't even think of, but you in 2015 try to commit suicide, you survive. And just to, add these facts, the fact that your mother died 8 months later after Griffin passed away from the drug overdose in 2011, your dad diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and in 2015, when you survived that suicide attempt, your dad dies while you're in a coma. How much can a man handle? And how did you get through it?
Well, I had the support of some great people that I didn't even know were there. And by that I mean when you shoot yourself, or when you survive shooting yourself, or you survive some traumatic brain injury, you're not going to remember a whole lot of it. And I don't. And I don't remember. There's a good 3 or 4 years there. I don't really remember much. And my girlfriend now was not my girlfriend back then. Anna Durgan is somebody I went to high school with. But she was integral in getting me to the right facilities. And my aunt, Patrice, my mom's sister, they were, part of my recovery was done at UCLA, Brain Trauma Center. I was there for a couple of weeks. A woman comes in named Rose Leal from a place called CNS. I thought she just walked in the door. Well, my Anna and my aunt set that up. I thought when I was living at one of their houses eventually, and I thought, oh, someone just picked that house out for me. Or this is the house I'm going for. Well, no. My aunt, they have 2 houses. One, they're both near a freeway. One was more near the off-ramp. They had thought, well, gosh, is he going to want to do it again and walk up the off-ramp on the freeway? So they even picked out the room that I was in. And so you have people looking out for you that you don't even know are there. And so I owe my now life to them, helping get me through that part of the recovery.
One thing that I'd like to know is, like, did you kind of see these issues while you were playing football? Did you have these issues while you were playing football, or did it happen after? And I say that because I remember listening to Joe Theismann one time at a banquet, and he said when he broke his leg and he was lying in the hospital, he was really at a crossroads because of his entire life, he was Joe Theismann, the football player. And then it's like, who am I?
Yeah.
Did you go through that similar phase in your life?
Sure. I remember it was 1999. We were playing a game in Kansas City, and that was a game that I played in, and my wife at the time, Marshawn, had taken our kids home back to LA area. And so this was on like Tuesday night or something, and I'm literally wake up from what turned out to be a pinched nerve in my neck, and I guess it was a couple herniated discs. That's what it was. And I ended up driving myself to the hospital, like barely even, like I was hunched down backward and or leaning back, could barely see over the steering wheel. And I'm in the hospital, and eventually a doctor comes in a couple days later, and because this was my second neck injury of that, and he comes in and he says, well, I'm sorry to say that your career's now over. And I remember thinking, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And I was in one part of me, a slight part of me was almost relieved, and the other part just physically.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the heck am I going to do now? And eventually you make your way, and you start to, first thing I did was kind of physically, took me about a year to kind of get better. And then started coaching my son's youth football team, and started a Sunday passing camp, and we ran it like a little practice, and we had a meeting in the classroom before, go out on the field, and I guess there was some guy from Fox that was in the classroom that day, and I get a phone call saying, do I want to come down and audition? He goes, for what? Or I said, for what? He goes, well, to do games and stuff. And I said, okay. And I was terrible. And I don't know what made them bring me back.
You've continued to try to reach out and give back and help others. Tell us about Mental Health Touchdown.
Yeah, so a friend of mine who I'd played college football with, and he played in the pros as well, I don't know what this was, a couple years ago maybe, he himself was an athletic director, and is, at a high school in Henderson, Nevada, and a head football coach. And he had the school he was at, or is at, didn't have any athletic facilities of any kind. And I think it's been tough for him to get the backing of what he needs. At the same time, his older brother had passed away from cancer unexpectedly. His mother passed away. He's from the Charlotte area, and I think he had sort of just lost his way a bit. And so I remember driving out there on a handful of occasions, and I even had a therapist friend of mine. I asked if it was okay if I did that. He said sure, and then over time I asked Kevin, that's my friend that was talking with him, and he said yeah. Kevin was very impressed that my friend would volunteer some information, but he'd kind of almost get to the curb, and then kind of hang back. And so out of that, I thought, why are we waiting until someone turns 50 or 40 or 30 even? And so there's a part to this Mental Health Touchdown that's going to deal with young kids like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, hopefully on up through high school, where it'll start out with a curriculum where there's a woman also named Catherine Casimir who is involved in this, and her background is social change theater, and she works in her outfit's called Bright World, and they deal in schools in Ventura County right now. And what this will be is getting young kids to be able to identify, hopefully in themselves, but at least in those around them, what they aspire to be character-wise. And then eventually some scenes will get played out, both on the positive side and what happens in the bullying situation, whether it be cyberbullying or even bullying in your own team, school, could be at home. And so learning to build your own home team around that. And so if you can start out at a young age and carry that through the end of high school, then you're on the path to getting out, kind of avoiding, you would say, the isolation that comes, that accompanies anxiety and depression.
The website is www.ekpass12.com. Erik Kramer has been our guest, former NFL quarterback and former Calgary Stampeder. And by the way, before we let you go, Erik, I don't know if you know this, George Hopkins.
Yes.
1,000th game this year.
Really?
Yes.
Love that
They
guy.
had the trainer for the Stampeders, equipment guy, I should say.
Right.
They had I'm telling you, I think they almost had a parade for him in Calgary.
I love it. I remember after practices in training camp, George had a large, like a steel bucket, filled it with water, put up a fake palm tree, and that guy is a great character, man. I love him.
There you go. Well, they had a lot of love this year for his 1,000th game in the CFL as part of the Stampeders organization. Erik, this has been a treat. Thank you so much for stopping by, and best of luck in all your endeavors.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys.